Welcome to episode 113 of the Clive Barker podcast. This one is Clive Barker Stories, Art, and Inspiration with Don Bertram. So you might recognize his name. Don Bertram is a sponsor of our podcast. And it's a cool sponsor because he's an artist and he does the Arts and Medicine program with Texas Children's Cancer Center. So at least 50% of the proceeds from the sale of his art go to the Texas Children's Cancer Center. Just because we know that he's a sponsor, we've got a link on the website, and also just because it's a good thing to do, we've got a link on the site where you can go to buy his artwork on his Etsy page. He's got two books also, so check that out. And here we go. This is episode 113, and we're joined by Don Bertram, and we've talked a little bit about Celebrate Imagination ourselves, but maybe you could tell us in better detail what you do there.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm Don Bertram from down here in Texas, a big-time admirer and enthusiast for Clive Barker's work and person for 20 or more years already. But he inspired me from a trip I took to the studio one time. I had just been painting for about, 6 months or so, and I was privy to some of the very first Aberrat images. And as a matter of fact, the big old map had maybe half of it was done and some of it was drawn in. And he told me a few things. Well, anyway, the point is that after I'd left there, my whole deal was I didn't know what I was doing. And I said, well, here's a guy that is just going after it big time. If he can do it, I can do it. Now, I know that's pretty ballsy to say that, but I just dove into it. And within just a few years, I was being noticed in Houston and around. I was in galleries. And so I decided to use all this. I really didn't have to have the money. And I knew that to depend on your art to actually live on, it's very easy to lose your enthusiasm for that art because, art is something that comes naturally, and it's a tough business to be in. So I decided to crawl in bed with charities that I believed in, and the one that I felt the most comfortable with was at Texas Children's Hospital, their cancer center with the children. So I was selling a lot of paintings, and I decided I would donate the monies directly to the kids. And since I deal with them every month out there, I could just take the money and be sure it got exactly where it went. But it all was seeded by Clive Barker. Now, he never told me to do it. It's funny. You live at the same times as certain people, and you experience things, and things just happen. And I've talked to him a couple times, trying to get him to take some credit for what's happened here, and he gives it all back to me. But that's Clive. That's just, if you know Clive, that's just the way he is. And but it's led to a fantastic relationship. But as of now, just to let you know what happened, with no lessons or anything, or not knowing what I was doing, I didn't even know what kind of brush to buy. I couldn't draw or anything. I've now painted 1,100 paintings, and there's
my God,
500 to 600 are all over the world. I have 2 books in the Contemporary Arts Museum here in Houston, and countless articles and things. And I always Clive Barker as a name, as an artist, for us enthusiasts, will never lose its power. We'll never lose our love for that. But in the real world of entertainment, if you do not have a hit going or a bunch of trash being talking about you on TMZ or something like that, then you fade away into oblivion almost. And it's a shame, Yes. With Clive Barker, and I hope he listens to this because, again, I cannot speak for Clive and never would want to. He can only speak for himself. But he's phenomenal. he is phenomenal. And anybody that's actually sat down and been able to have a little time with him, you know, I don't throw around things like genius and descriptions like that, because, you know, that kind of infers that you are capable of telling what a genius, genius is. So it kind of elevates you to a certain area. But I can, with all honesty, say this is a man that is important. And I knew that from the very beginning. And it just so happened that as our paths crossed, and I haven't talked to him in a while, but, you know, we do have some friends in common. And it's been an amazing thing. I just love it. It's really enriched my life a lot. But anyhow, getting back to Celebrate Imagination, I can talk forever, but Celebrate Imagination just amounts to me going to the hospital once a month. I take 2 or 3 pieces of art, and these are the the children with cancer, and I go in the waiting rooms. I take them by the hand. I take them on an artistic journey. And this has been seeded, nobody knows except now everybody here, and Clive, that was really seeded by him. And this is like one of those waves that forms from that little stone that's thrown in the pond, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And that's what I do. So I try to take them on a journey to get them away from the drama they're dealing with at this time. And we all know that art can do that. That's why it's so important that we keep it around and live in it. I live in it.
Oh, yeah.
I completely agree. I think artwork is what makes life it's what gives color to life. It's what makes life worth living. It's really, and it's fantastic that Clive can inspire so many people around the world. Sometimes people who in their own right have their own talent, but they only need that push in the right direction to engage and start spreading their artwork to more and more people like you're doing. That's really fabulously generous of you.
Well, what he needs to, and again, you're exactly right. And I've sent Clive notes on and off to remind him, Texas, I'm always the person from Texas that lets him know that we're way down south. Not many people get down to Texas because there's so many cowboy boots and other things in the way. You sometimes can't get to Houston, Texas. But I let him know that he has reached a lot of people. And again, I'm not 100% sure. I might not have done this anyway. But as you know, people will see if the letters I've gotten and the stuff I've gotten from him, somebody that you feel is really important. This is what people need in the early days, and I really think this was seeded in Clive by the Stephen King remarks for him.
Oh, yeah, that made a huge difference.
He has said many times how important that was to him, and I'm not 100% sure that he even had read all of Stephen King's books. But when you have somebody that's appreciated and a true really good at what they do and popular, that actually drop that little bombshell on the public, that can send a career going everywhere. And it certainly helped Clive, because, Clive is not mainstream. He'll never be mainstream. And he's also in the bastard child entertainment field of horror, or started out there, where people avoid usually. And those people that take entertainment seriously tend to avoid it too, except those of us that know there's something there besides blood and guts, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So you're a self-taught artist. That's very impressive. And you received the Randall's Community Hero Award.
Yeah, and see, that was something that I didn't even know existed at the time. And so I just blew it off. Again, this throwing the word hero around is overused big time. And those of us that sometimes get that name, it's a great thing for me to put on a resume, I guess, if I wanted to, but we know who the real heroes are. And I would never put myself in that category. I'm proud of what I do, and I'm proud of the results I've got with it. But the good thing about this thing was it got me that I could put that title out. I could put it on the card, so it gets attention is all it does. And then I can take it from there. I guess it's kind of like that statement, put it on the books of blood. Stephen King says see the future of horror like he did. This is the same thing. You put hero, community hero. It's just, I was just picked that year for that. But I'm not knocking it. That was a fantastic thing to have, and I'm very proud of it.
Well, when was the first time that you saw Clive Barker?
Well, let's tell you my first experience with Clive Barker, which was also seminal for me, was he's the very first piece of original art I ever bought from anybody. And that's a big deal because I'm sure you guys have experienced this. Once you buy an original piece of art, it's very, very, very hard to buy a reproduction. Stand in front of that piece with the you see where Clive's brush marks are. You see the hairs from his brush that might be stuck in this thing there. You see a piece of Clive and his mind. It's so hard to write by a reproduction, even though I did get truckloads of them in the past, and I do have a bunch. But the first time I had anything to do with Clive was in 1994, which it was in Arlington, Virginia. I went to the Famous Monsters convention there because I'm of the generation where TV, and when I was young, TV was just becoming in everybody's homes. Okay, the early 60s, that was about the time that everybody had a television. The 50s, some people did, some people didn't, and in the later 60s, then we got colored television. But during the early 60s, just like cable is now, you could get on cable now with anything, as you can see what's on cable pretty much nowadays. But back in the early 60s and late 50s, it was easy to get on network television because there was hardly any shows, you know. So I grew up on all these rehashes of the Universal monsters and all of this kind of stuff, which was the early horror films that made it to all the network shows then and were played over and over again, along with the early Tarzans, all of that stuff, and mainly because there was nothing else, and they were obviously cheap. I guess the studios were probably selling them cheap to the networks or whatever. So, Famous Monsters and what's his name? Who's got it?
Forrest Ackerman.
Forrest Ackerman. Forgive me for forgetting that. Made him a handful.
Uncle Forey. Yeah.
Uncle Forey, and he will beat us early monster kids. And Clive's an early monster kid. Me and Clive are about the same age, so we kind of fit into that same thing. I had went there because a friend of mine had written a book on Carol Borland, who was the first vampira in the, I want to say the early 30s, and Mark of the Vampire, which was a redo of that London After Midnight, you know, the Lost film.
Yeah.
And so I go, and my favorite place, and always has been at these conventions, is the dealer's room. I eat it up, and I love it. Well, there in the back of the room was Bess Cutler's tables. We didn't have a bunch of walls or anything hanging up, but there was plenty of art. And if you go on eBay right now, somebody is trying to sell a bunch of that. It was spooky something. You'll have to go. Just go on there and filter stuff from most expensive to least expensive. On Barker, and you can see them. Well, a handful of those things were there, and I stood there. My twin brother had me read the Books of Blood a few years before, and I knew this was something. He was something special. So I said, can I do this? Can I buy one of these paintings? His first show was in 93, I believe, at Bess Cutler in New York. So in essence, what I was seeing was probably the leftovers of the show. So there was a handful of things up, including like three portfolios of all these early drawings that you could just flip through, and they all had prices. And as everybody knows the prices, even the prices back then were very expensive. Yeah. So I was talking to the person there, and to Herb, I think it was Herb Schwartz at the time, and he said, "Just make me an offer," And
that's cool.
Yeah, and I'm going, "I don't think you'll accept." He says, "Just make me an offer." So I went. Well, I slept there that night. I got up and made him the offer. And the next morning, before I knew it, here I had my art being shipped to me.
Fantastic.
It was the fetal position, in case anybody knows which one that is. But it's not a real popular one because it wasn't published much. But when I got it, that started an issue with me now buying art. And as you guys know, I don't know how old you are, but art is a mental luxury, but it's also a financial luxury.
Oh, yes.
You don't buy art. You enjoy it your entire life, but you don't buy it and own it until you finally have some expendable income. Yeah. And that is harder now than ever. And this is a problem with Clive and a handful of people in that genre.
Absolutely.
Is the people that follow that, they're not old enough yet. I mean, you really have to be, unless you're born wealthy, which I wasn't, but until you get to be, let's say, 40 to 50, you're pretty much stuck with art books and maybe some print. You know what I mean?
That is your only choice. Yeah. If I can expound on what you were bringing up, I mean, I'm approaching 40, but I was lucky. I was lucky to collect some artwork at an early age, and especially comic book art. I like a lot of comic book art, so I have a lot of original pages from the Marvel '90s Hellraiser comics.
Go for it! I love it.
Some of the graphic novels that came out from Eclipse.
Oh, really?
I have a page from Dread. I think it's from Dan Brereton, who did the Nocturnals. And I have like a John Bolton original, and I have a Kent Williams original. So those are, like you were saying earlier, it's when you look at the piece and you're holding it in your hands and you think to yourself, this is what the artist created. Any other comic book that features this page is just a reproduction that
you can go run off yourself if you wanted to.
Yeah, and it's amazing. For example,
run it off.
Yeah, and I usually say that I don't buy the art. I don't own it. I just keep it for whoever is going to come after me, because I think of myself as a curator almost. When you buy like a valuable piece of art, you look at it and you're like, I'm going to enjoy that as much as I can, and then eventually it will be passed on to someone else.
That's right.
Yeah, and I hope that they will care for it as much as I did. And Clive Barker's paintings, for a long time, and he has both ink sketches and painted stuff. And so I've always enjoyed both of his forms of art. And the thing is, especially for his painted art, it was always pale in comparison when you looked at the originals, because when they reproduced it, maybe the printing process wasn't the best, maybe the paper wasn't the best. And recently, I remember a few years back, Revelations, clivebarker.info, which are the official Clive Barker website.
Gotta love those people over there. Phil and Zach are the best.
They're awesome, yeah. And so they started posting these pictures of details and close-ups of Clive Barker's painting, because it does have a topography to it. He uses the canvas knife very liberally, and sometimes he paints with a canvas knife. He just piles up that paint over there, and he makes this little hill in the painting. And when you see a two-dimensional flat page reproduction, you cannot see the way the painting works with that topography when the light shines on it and everything. Luckily, now there's.
Let's make a little. Let's have a little an analogy there. You have that original painting in your hand with all that impasto and that thickness and that personality. Let's say that's similar to the carpet in Weave World, and in that topography and all. That's all of Clive Barker's thoughts, feelings, emotions, and all that were going on at the time he was doing that. It may not be the little creatures and things that are in Weave World that we all know, but you have a piece of Clive Barker when you do that.
And that is something.
You are a curator of that art. The biggest mistake people make, in my opinion, and this is to me, I've only really seen this in the wealthy, is buying art as investments. If you buy art for the love of it, you never, ever, ever lose. You cannot lose. Art doesn't work that way. But if you want to go to a gallery and let somebody convince you that maybe Max Ernst or Chagall or somebody, this is going to be worth more and more later, and you sit around your entire life waiting for that to go up in price.
Yeah.
So I feel sorry for you, because, look at the people. I'm sure there's a few people that do that with Clive Barker stuff now. I'm sure there's people that have bought that art going, well, if he passes away, or if it becomes really more famous and more accepted and all this kind of stuff, this is going to be worth all kinds of money, and I can sell it and all this stuff. Well, too bad, because first of all, art doesn't become, if it's going to become extremely, extremely valuable, it's going to be not during your generation. It's going to be generations after you when he is rediscovered by other generations.
Sure.
You know, that's
and
when you're going to go ahead.
Yeah, and also the value of art is subjective. I mean, an example. Okay, I used to buy a lot of stuff from Clive Barker. I have a huge collection of Clive Barker stuff, all his books, T-shirts from movies in production that they were giving those to the stage hands or something like that.
Right.
And I have like the Lylesburg's Midian key medallion that he was holding in Nightbreed that he releases the Berserkers with. I have that prop and other stuff like that. And it's like, I used to have an ex-girlfriend, okay, who shall remain nameless. But we're friends. I love her a lot. But she would sometimes look at me and said, "Did you buy that thing? How much did you pay for that?" And I would say the price, and she would be like, "I wouldn't have given a cent for that." And I would be like, "Well, you know what? That's why you didn't buy it. That's why I bought it because I love it. It's a part of me."
She needs to tell you, see, you have that passion for it, you know. She needs to come up with one thing that she might have bought that she has the passion for that you have for
sure.
that. And she'll probably, I don't think she can match it. I don't think she could match the passion you have for that, that piece from.
You need to respect that love that people have. And in some ways, art is a little subjective in its value because sometimes, you know, people could pay $76 million for a Picasso, while another person would be like, "I'd rather buy this thing I got from IKEA." Hey, it's fine. If it works for him, that's all the power to him.
I get my paintings at Fred Meyer.
Yeah, it's very subjective. It fluctuates a lot, you know, with some of the art.
People need to remember, too, art is not a liquid asset. When you finally sell it, you know, this is one of, you know, is how much money are you going to give away to sell it if you can sell it? And with somebody like Clive Barker, in my opinion, and I don't think he would want it this way. And I'm not so 100% sure that he may not agree with me. I don't know, but I'm not so sure he wants it to be that way. I'm not sure he would rather leave the art somewhere and let other people see it and have it available to the community than have us purchase it and kind of hide it away in our home and then hope we can find somebody later on when we're ready to move it on that can appreciate it as much. I really think he would rather have it out there for everyone to enjoy, everyone to appreciate.
Ideally, certainly, yeah. Of course, there's always the practicality of the business of art, which, you know, it gets into the expenses of living. So I do understand that artists need to make a living out of their artwork. So
there was an issue with The Arsonist, right, where they were trying to put that into the.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Which The Arsonist.
I know a little bit about The Arsonist. I never saw it in person, but. It's brought up to me more than once that, you know, it was bought by somebody, in my opinion. But that person, and again, this is all hearsay, and I could never mention a name because I don't know any names. And this did not come from any real reliable source. But the deal is that, in my opinion, it was bought by somebody who really wasn't even hanging it. It was just like stored away. Now, maybe that was the investor mode. I don't know.
And they couldn't get a good scan of it to put in the book, so they used some computer art.
No, what I've heard was that nobody would cooperate with them so they could at least get that back. And if I'm not mistaken, Clive would buy that back. From all the rumors and things I heard over the year. If I have a piece that I want back, whatever personal reason, I would buy it back. And if somebody's going to hold out and not, you know, for whatever reason, whether it be financial or whatever, it's just a shame. So you're exactly right. You'll never see that piece clean. I mean, an image of it really, really clean. But, you know, we still know what it is, and we still know how he feels about it.
Yeah, I do remember back in the time when Rizzoli was preparing to post The Visions of Heaven and Hell.
That's the one I was thinking of,
Yeah, I do remember that at the time there was an announcement made. I think it was – I'm not sure if it was still CliveBarker.com. I think it was already Revelations. And they did put out an announcement saying, we would like to contact the person who has The Arsonist so we could get a good, proper photo of it for this book. We would love to include it. And like you said, Ryan, they had to include an older picture that had lower resolution. That's a shame.
I wanted to mention something else while we were talking about the Arlington 1994, which really goes back. Clive really, if I'm not mistaken, weren't the Books of Blood in 85?
84 and 85.
Okay, and when did he move to L.A.?
90, I think.
90. Okay, well that makes sense because
or 89. It was I think. No, it was probably even later because I think he built his second house with money from Lord of Illusions.
Okay, well, I didn't know that much was made from Lord of Illusions.
Yeah.
It was funny. I was invited to that audience, to the showing of that, where they invite an audience in. Is it the trial audience where you can go in there, and put comments, and then they change endings?
About a test audience.
Yeah, something like that, exactly.
Yeah.
And
test screenings.
But, that was in New York, and that was around the Best Cutler days. As a matter of fact, an interesting aside, that fetal position that I bought, my very first piece of Clive Barker art, which I still love big time, wasn't signed. And I want you to know that I searched that thing. I looked at every little piece of crayon mark trying to find a Barker. So I did get a letter from him stating, yes, that's me. Which that made me happy. No, but the first time I ever met Clive himself was the very next year. I went by myself, and people with twins know that we stick together a lot. This was the first time I thought enough to go to L.A. on my own and meet him. And I went to the Fangoria convention there, and it was such a fantastic convention. There were so many things. They even had a big old 7-foot pumpkin head when you walked in, and Jack Nicholson was there doing his wolf thing. But finally, when Clive Barker went out to his table, which is what it was, he was still with Best Cutler then. I was stuck at the very back of that line, and it would have taken me a good 2 hours to get to Clive and say hello. This is me. This is who's been corresponding with the artwork. And so I got in touch with that. Is it Anthony Tiponi? Is he the guy who's in charge of Fangoria?
He was.
He was. Okay. Well, at the time, that's who I went and talked. I said, look, my plane is leaving in 40 minutes. The only reason I came here from Texas was to get up here and say hi to Clive, show him who I was, and tell him where some of his paintings were. And he, believe it or not, he walked me to the front of the line. I cut in front of all those people. I don't know if that would happen anymore. I cut in front of all those people, and that was my first time to meet Clive Barker. That
Fantastic.
one time.
Fantastic.
What year was that?
That was, I want to say it was 1995.
Oh, okay.
Because I bought the painting of the piece in 94. And Clive was not at that convention in Arlington, Virginia. And at the Fangoria convention in 1995, they did not have an art display. It was just him there doing his signing 100 million times that he's done. I've never seen a man sign so many things in my entire life.
Oh, yeah.
I just feel guilty about asking him back in the old days.
Well, I've only met Clive once, and it wasn't even like a real meeting. But I did visit the studio. Everything happened for me on the day that, Ryan and myself and another friend of ours, Roger, we founded Occupy Midian, the group on Facebook that pushed for the Nightbreed director's cut release.
I sent many requests into the studio for that too.
Yeah, and
before I even formed Occupy Midian, I think you guys realized you had something you had to do, and you did a great job at it.
Yeah, thank you. But so ultimately, when the movie was finally done, the director's cut was cut with Andrew Furtado and Mark Miller and Clive Barker, and so they did this premiere screening at the Crest in Westwood, L.A.
I remember that.
Yeah, and so were you there?
No, I couldn't go.
Okay. And so we were there, and we were in the front row of the theater, and that was the first time that I saw Clive get on stage. Unfortunately, when we visited the studio earlier that day, we were only given a tour of the Seraphin offices, and I had the amazing experience of having Ryan say, "Hey, hold this," and then he handed me the manuscript of Magicka.
And Magicka, there you go.
I know.
Talking about the Bible.
It was just sitting on a table.
Yeah, and so I was like, "Oh my God, this is a Magicka. This is the book that defined me as a person, almost." And
Seraphim has wondered where that went ever since. So you better.
It was so many manuscripts. I think I would have to, drag all of those in a trunk of a car. But anyway, so that was my first time seeing Clive on stage in person, because I'm from Portugal. So for most of my life, I lived in Portugal. I moved here in 2013 when I got married to my American wife. And so for me, it was always really hard being a fan in a country where only one of his books was translated. And now I think there's two of them.
Was it a Magicka?
No. It was The Damnation Game. It was published in Portugal a long time ago. And then, more recently, they've published The Thief of Always in a Portuguese edition. Really? But those are the only two books that exist in Portugal translated from Clive Barker. So at an early age, I had to learn English when I was like 7 years old, because my dad wanted me to learn English. And I can say to this day that, yes, I did learn English in school and I did read some English, but the person who made me fall in love with the English language was really Clive Barker. When I was a teenager, after watching Hellraiser, after watching Nightbreed and Lord of Illusions, I started importing his books. There wasn't even Amazon or eBay at the time, so you had to find a shop that would import them from England, and it would cost you an arm and a leg just to get these books. So I think I got first, I think it was Cabal, and then I got the Books of Blood, and then moved on from there, and Weave World and Damnation Game. So, and I never looked back. But
wow.
So for me, it was Clive Barker who made me fall in love with the English language. Again, for a person who never even met him, who didn't even live in the same continent, but his influence spreads out and touches a lot of people, and makes us realize that, hey, you know what? I shouldn't have any prejudice. I shouldn't be, being different is okay. That's the stuff that his work will inculcate upon you when you read it, is that it's beautiful to be different. It's amazing. It's, you can open up a whole new world if you just keep an open mind and accept people as they are. Instead of just being like trying to mold people into like your idea of who they should be, just embrace the variety. And I think that's really what made me, become the open-minded person I am today. So thank you, Clive.
Well, there you go. I think there's a lot of people could thank Clive for a lot of things. He needs to know that. And, somebody who has health issues and, first of all, he does need to be left alone. He does need to have his time. He's going to get better. And I don't know if everybody watches, checks into the Real Clive Barker website, where they sell the stuff out of Seraphim pretty much, a lot of it out of Clive's own collection. But I watch his art all the time, and what's showed up on there, his drawings in the last 3 weeks or so, I don't know if you guys have looked at it.
Oh, yeah.
To me, is a tremendous boost of confidence about his health, because I feel like I can feel something, that there's something going on, more thought, and that comes with a healthier body too. And I know he's going to get better. And to me, this 2016, that showed to me that there's a big spark igniting in there again. We don't know what's going to come out of Clive Barker. It makes me so excited. A lot of people know I'm also a Beatle nut, so it's funny that I should. That's my generation talking, but I tend to lean toward Liverpool for some reason, and we're just very fortunate to live during the time that people like this exist. So we can experience it. We don't have to just see it from old books and things that have been reproduced and all over the years. And it just made me real excited to see those. So I was hoping if anybody hadn't looked on there, in fact, I have to reel myself in. I have enough Clive Barker art right now. And I was so tempted to pick up about 4 of those drawings, and I didn't do it. I didn't do it, but it was sure tempting me. People need to look on there. Go and look on there, guys, and see if, they aren't really expensive, and there are some really good pieces left on there.
Yeah, Clive has had health issues, like you said, and he also had. I think he mentioned this in an interview to Entertainment Weekly. He had 3 strokes in the past few years, so that also kind of put a damper.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, but so it's interesting because we spoke a couple of times with Thomas Nagovin of the Century Guild, who at the time was representing Clive Barker's art, and he mentioned to us that after Clive came out of his coma, his artwork became different, became a little more visceral, a little more raw, a little more unfinished, but at the same time, it gave it a new kind of quality to it that he hadn't seen before in his previous paintings. And I remember seeing recently a picture of an ink drawing that Clive was doing, and it said that he pulled a reed from his backyard and he was using it as a brush. And I thought that's really amazing. That's Clive right there.
He said more than once, it doesn't matter how you make the mark. He has told that, just make the mark. You can use whatever you have to, but make the mark. And I think he was quoting like Goya or somebody. I know it was a famous artist, he had told me. It was funny, I talked to him once about mine. I wanted to tell you before I forgot that for 2 things that are important to me. First of all, Ryan, I wanted to tell you the first time I ever heard or knew anything about you was I saw an image of that drawing that Clive had done of your little boy.
Oh, yeah, right.
I loved it. I said, oh, see, that's I like that vulnerable, sweet. That's a whole side of Clive. That's so different from the other things that we see. But I love that piece. I said, golly, how lucky to have Clive actually pen an image of my son or of somebody I know. I really envied you for that.
That was in Texas.
What? You're kidding me.
No, that was at Texas Frightmare Weekend.
Well, I saved that and I have it in my little Clive Barker file. I keep all my special Clive Barker photos in there. And I always look at that and every time I look at it, I envy it. But the other thing that we share in common with all you guys is my brother, my twin brother, just happened to be, not officially, but we were affiliated with Morpheus Galleries on Wilshire.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he was indirectly the local representative for H.R. Giger.
Wow.
And Texas doesn't exactly open up arms and welcome in H.R. Giger. But you know what? Neither did New York. I mean, that was at the Museum of Fine Arts up there. Told him the only way he would ever get in that museum was if he bought a ticket, and that was, I thought, a pretty low blow. But what me and Ron, my brother, would do is we would go to the theaters, and he would set up an entire exhibit of H.R. Giger lithographs and all this kind of stuff that we had. And I would set up an entire exhibit of Clive Barker stuff. Now, there was no pay in this. This was for the love of doing it. Just like you guys. Nobody's sending you a check for the hours you spend on this here. Yeah. You love it. You want to do it. We would haul all that stuff out there and do it. Now, I didn't get permission from any studios. I didn't get permission from Clive Barker or nothing. But I was not going to be out there pretending to be Clive Barker or speak for Clive Barker, but I was spreading Clive Barker, and I had a blast. And every time I would do that, I would send pictures and a note to Seraphim and I think it was Rob Humphreys that was there at the time, and say, "This is what we did. Here's what it looked like." Blah, 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 blah. And we did
That's amazing.
We did it 2 or 3 times, and the last time I did it was just a few years ago. But I was trying to help promote those, and please forgive me for not knowing the company, but Clive had somebody promoting Halloween masks and things.
Trick or Treat or something, I think it was called.
Yeah, I have one of them. I have the Fishman one.
Okay, well that's exactly right. That's the company that was doing it, and they sent me, Seraphim sent me a DVD that I could play while I was there to show people, what was going on. That was the last really close contact I had with Seraphim, but it was our experiences, and I wanted to tell you guys this because we share this common bond of doing something for Clive for the love of it, and
Yeah,
not
exactly,
because
yeah.
we're on a payroll and that kind of a thing. So I had to make that clear. And
That's cool.
Kudos to all of you for that. But again, I was out there. I had all those images from Best Cutler, all that kind of stuff, and I was not really selling it, but I was directing them to those people that would sell it to them if they were interested. And then again, Clive Barker and H.R. Giger at the time, you're dealing with the T-shirt crowd and the poster crowd.
Yeah.
You're not dealing with people that want to pay $800 for lithograph.
Yeah.
Morpheus International, when you opened up one of the books from one of the artists that they published, it was like opening a door into a wonderland, a very dark wonderland. I remember Wayne Barlow. He's an amazing artist. He's like...
Yes.
He's right there, number 2 or even number 1, along with Clive Barker in my book. And when I read the Scarlet Gospels recently, I sat down and I looked at paintings from Brushfire, Illuminations from the Inferno, and I looked at Wayne Barlow's Inferno, and that was just perfect. It was a perfect marriage of literature and visuals for me. And I advise anyone who doesn't know who Wayne Barlow is, go out there and Google him up, and you will find these amazing paintings that he's done. They're really mind-blowing. I just had to say that.
While we did the gear thing, we also put up promotional posters for Wayne Barlow, and I think they had calendars at the time, and they had books at the time. And those people that investigate that, I think you'll be surprised to see the similarity between his art in that book and a lot of stuff you see in a lot of these independent films. I mean, and I don't think he gets any credit for any of that, you know.
Right,
it's almost like the Alien. It's almost like Giger's Alien, how many times that similar alien pops up in other films, you know.
Oh, yeah, like Split Second.
It's like some artists manage to create. Some artists they open the way for certain things, and then others just follow them and expand on it. So I think Giger was one of those people. Clive Barker is one of those people. Wayne Barlow is one of those people. They push beyond the envelope, and then they open the door for other people to go in and expound on that direction. That's very
potent. That's very potent. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Very good. Another thing I did for Clive, which nobody asked me to do, was I took my collection up to the museum. Now, see, this is how naive I was. Now, at this older age, I probably wouldn't do this, but I took my collection up to the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, where it seems like they're more interested in Impressionists than anything else, but I should have went to the Contemporary Art Museum anyway. But I took it up there, and I tried to get him a museum show because, you know, this was right around Lord of Illusions, and so his name was out there, and I thought somebody would know it. Of course, I really didn't know what I was doing, but I didn't think it mattered. I had the passion, and, you know, people see that, they feel that. So I took a step up there, I told him about it. Of course, I'd have done better had I had a tennis shoe hanging from a stick on a string and photographed it. I think they might have put that in an exhibit before they would even touch anything by Clive Barker.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I finally got a call back, and they said, well, we really don't have a position now, because you have to do these like 1 to 2 years in advance to put Clive in a show. But if you would like me to call Dallas and get you an interview up there, I would be more than happy to do that. And the whole time I'm going, I don't think I'm going to waste my time.
Right.
If you have to call and tell somebody you might want to hear this, no. At the time, I had been told by Cutler galleries that Clive really wanted a museum show, and the Laguna Art Museum show where he had the Illusion Suite. Y'all are familiar with that, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
That horizon-lined pyramid that is all those big, like, what are they, 24 by 30-inch ink-painted images. Fantastic. Nobody ever talks about it. Nobody ever tries to explain it. Clive wouldn't explain it to me. It's like it's meant to remain a mystery, but that's what made me try to get him a show in Houston. I thought, well, he had that. Let's get another one under our belt. And so, if nothing else, I don't think it meant that much to Clive, but it looks great on a resume to people that don't know Clive,
Certainly, yeah.
And I got a couple of pieces from that museum show because I just had to have it. I would just eat up with it. And just a sideline, those that follow Clive's art from back then, they had the Illusion Suite portfolios. Are you familiar with those?
I think I've heard of it. I'm trying to...
It's very nice. They were all black and white. They came in these big envelopes that were about, 20-something inches by 16 inches. They had like 13 pieces in it. And the frontage piece was the only piece that was signed by Clive. They were numbered and signed by him. But there was supposed to have been like 300 or so of those. And just a sideline for those that are interested, to my understanding, less than half of those were ever signed. A lot of them were torn down and sold as little pieces.
Oh,
and
wow.
a whole slew of them were lost in water damage. So to actually, if you're on eBay and you see somebody getting rid of their Illusion Suite and it's actually one of the numbered and signed ones, you might want to pay attention to it because that is, I consider that a seminal piece of early Clive.
Okay, I just found it, and I'm looking at it right now on the Revelations website. So we'll add that link to the show notes for people who haven't heard of the Illusion Suite yet. And it was, I think, limited to 500 sets signed by Barker on the cover.
Does it say 500?
Yes.
Okay, well, I can almost guarantee it that if there's 100, I was told by the gallery that 130 were signed. I would love to have somebody phone in or email in and say that they had a higher number than that signed by Clive. At the same time, Best Color did a real shoddy thing, I thought, in quality-wise. They released 50 different photographic reproductions of Clive's art. They were all numbered, and they were signed by him. Very crude color things, really, really embarrassing. But part of the history, of Clive Barker. And
sure.
That's another thing. You hardly ever see those pop up, but every once in a while you'll see one of those crop up. So that's another thing to kind of look at. But there was 50 different ones, and what they did was they were selling them for like $50 each one of those pictures.
Wow.
So that was another Best Color thing.
The fact that you were talking about the quality of the photographic reproductions made me want to bring up something, which is, do you have the first volume of Clive Barker Imaginer?
I have I have. I will always. I was one of those supporters, and I've supported number 2 too. And I just wish it would arrive. I know it's
yeah.
Well,
eventually,
the thing,
I got in touch with Mark Miller about them because those of us that had the clamshells, those are perfect. Those turned out perfect, and he sent me an email saying that they were just waiting for the packing material to put them in to ship them out.
Oh wow!
But they are sitting there in Seraphim, and I guess there were 100 of those. I'm not really sure, but yeah, I'm in the front of that, backing that project.
Wonderful.
And I will always back a Clive Barker art project.
Of course. Ryan, you saw something some time ago that there was some kind of problem with the binding of the books or something, right? It was not acceptable.
They had to get them all rebound. I mean, probably not the one you're talking about, but the regular hardcover editions.
They're the same. No, I take it back because the ones that are the clamshell ones are going to be the ones with the tipped-in pages and the signed and numbered. So that would have been a different lot. Yeah, that's what I heard. But every one of the other ones had to be sent back. Yeah. And Nagovan is a real stickler for perfection with that, and that's how Clive needs to be treated in regard to that. So I was kind of glad, but it's also delayed me getting mine, and I want it. Haven't flipped. I don't see what it's like, So
I believe the plan is for them to make at least 8 volumes, but who knows when that's going to happen.
It's in Phil and Sarah's hands. That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
So
right.
I couldn't put it in better hands, but you can't do everything. That's the problem. You need help.
One of the really amazing things that this new process of archiving Clive's art brought up was that they finally started making them properly color corrected to reproduce in the books, and this was thanks to the work of Jim Kay of Transmission Atelier. He was color matching when we visited the studio for the Nightbreed premiere. Mm-hmm. We visited the studio, and Jim was there, and he was working on, I think it was Matter Motley.
Yeah,
wasn't it? Yeah, the painting of Matter Motley that's on the cover of the third book of the Aberrat, and it was amazing because.
Oh, that red one. Okay, I got you.
Yeah, actually, the background for it is white. The red was put in for the cover, but he was color correcting it, and the way they did it was they had a light box pointed at the painting. The painting is standing upright at a 90-degree angle, and then they had the scan done, and he was on a big computer. He was color matching it with his own eyes. He would approach the painting, look at it, then go back to his computer, and he would painstakingly color match it so that the reproduction of the books would be as accurate as possible to real life. And I think that really makes a difference.
Yeah.
It does. It does. Now, again, it makes a big difference, but in reality, it depends on the audience that you're reaching as to how big of a difference that's going to make. I don't know if you understand.
Of course.
I like to put it this way. People have, and I've heard so many things about the New Imaginer books. They're fantastic. I'm not knocking them at all. But there will always, even though the Rizzoli books, is that how you say Rizzoli? Is that the Heaven and Hell book?
Yeah. I don't know which way to pronounce it either.
Well, that thing, that's probably going to be one of the most valuable Clive Barker art books ever out, because they destroyed many of those things because of the gold gilding they put on, cemented all the pages together.
Yeah.
To me, that book, with its imperfections, with those wonderful pieces that Clive wrote for each one of those chapters, I love them. Will probably always be my favorite Clive Barker art book, even though they may not be crystal clear and all. I've stood in front of so many of those paintings that I can see past that. But just something about knowing that Clive wrote those pieces, and they're feel so good. And I've read that a handful of times, and my memory's not good, so I enjoy it as much every time I pick it up and read it.
One of the book signings that I went to was for Mr. Be Gone in Seattle, and somebody raised their hand at the Q&A afterwards and said, "Hey, Clive, where do I get a book of your art?" And he started trying to describe this Rizzoli book, and so I held mine up in the air, and he goes, "That's it, that's the one right there." I was really hoping they were going to release a limited edition of that book, but the deal is, I'm sure once they realized they had an issue, and every store I went to, I would go and ask them if they had the Clive Barker new art book, and if they had it, every store had never been looked in, the books had never been looked in, because they were still cemented together, and you had to pry those pages apart, Man, and I swear I think I got mine at like a Barnes & Noble or a Borders or something.
Well, a handful of them ended up at half-price books. I don't know if you have
wow.
up there. Yeah, we had a short section down here where you could get as many as you wanted of those for like $12.95.
Well, and Thomas said that they never made it to the stores, but I swear I got mine at a regular bookstore.
What, Rizzoli?
Yeah.
Oh, no. I saw many of them at the regular stores. I saw them at Barnes & Noble, too.
Yeah.
No, they made them to the stores big time. They were in there. But getting back to
just not for very long.
No, not for very long, because I don't know if they were recalled, but
that might have been it. Yeah.
And they were not. Those were pretty expensive. Retail price on those books wasn't it like $50? Again, we're talking about
exactly $50. Yeah,
an expensive item for somebody who maybe has trouble, affording even a first edition graphic novel or something. You've got to be real about that. There was. I wanted to bring up, because this was very important in the Nightbreed history and also in my dealings with Clive Barker, was in 1995 I went to a Dragon Con in Georgia, And the reason I went there is because, first of all, I had a bunch of books I wanted to get signed. Again, I went by my little lonesome, hauled all that stuff up there. And Clive was going to give a talk on his art only. You know, they were going to have a slideshow and all this stuff, which he did. And my little fetal position showed up on the screen up there. And of course, I couldn't hold back my adulation and had to scream out, "That's mine!" You know, and Clive goes something like, I'd already talked to him a few times. He goes, "Yeah, it's nice to know somebody likes their, it makes it into good homes," or something like that. It was a real special thing. I wish those days would come back where we could have that kind of good interaction with them. I had an issue I had a little incident with Doug Bradley then. Clive and Doug were there to show Nightbreed, and they were
showed Hellraiser too. I was at that same show. Because I remember they showed Hellraiser, and that's where I learned the original title, or somebody proposed the title of what a woman wouldn't do for a good fuck. For that one. And I watched that with them. All they did was kind of make fun of it the entire time.
Well, let me tell you something.
I know you're right. They were going to show Nightbreed. I couldn't say. I think that was on a Thursday. That was Friday. They did that. The
Nightbreed was toward. It wasn't right at the beginning. But what I was going to say, this shows you how much of an idiot and naive somebody can be. I had just got there and I went into the little cafeteria thing to get me something to eat. And of course, I was all nervous. I'd never been in. I hadn't. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't want to miss anything. I didn't have a calendar yet to see exactly what was going on. And I run into Doug Bradley in this little eating place. And, of course, not everybody recognized him.
Yeah,
but I knew who he was. And so I went up to him. I said, "Do you mind if I sat down here?" And you know what and I have to apologize to him. You know what one of the first things I said to Doug Bradley was? I started complaining about... I can't believe I did this. I could kick my ass. I started complaining about some of the special effects in Nightbreed.
Oh,
Now, you remember that part and you'll know exactly what it is. Before they're in the cave and those flying like stingrays.
Yes.
I don't know I forget what those are called. But can you believe that? I would sit him down there and ask if I can. Would he want to sit at my table? And he would sit there, and I would bring that up of all.
And you know what's fascinating is that nowadays you can go on Facebook and friend Jeff Portis of Image Animation and complain to him. Yeah, I mean, I've had long conversations with Jeff Portis through Facebook, and I was like, "Hey, how did you guys did the makeup for Julia and Hellraiser 2 and this and that?" And he'll actually answer, and it's fascinating that Facebook brings people together that way. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you something, and I know our time, I could talk forever about Clive, and there's so many other things I want to bring up, but I wanted to ask you, did you go to the Magicka card game release party they had at the club that afternoon? Or were you aware of that?
No, I didn't go to that, no.
Okay, well, see, that was another reason I was there. I had an invitation, a ticket to go to, they were releasing, Hans Rufert and... one of his cohorts were...
that came out in 96.
It was right at that time. They had backing of, I forget, one of the publishers and all. And anyhow, they were promoting it there.
HarperCollins, right?
I think so. I think so. But they had all those artists involved. Giger was in that, Richard Kirk, all these people that have popped up since. And but anyhow, they were having the release party. And this release party was at this... a fringy club not too far from there where people actually, and this, I don't get off to this, and I'm not sure Clive does either. I don't speak for him, but people hang from hooks, with skin.
Yeah, suspensions.
Yeah, suspensions,
that kind of stuff. Well, maybe that you guys think, but that's the last thing I want to be staring at a party, and I saw the pictures from it. And I went and it was just too much, And as a matter of fact, I think I asked Clive if he went to that, and I don't think he even went to it. And I'm thinking that they probably thought they just took it for granted, this sadomasochistic thing that was going on, that he would really appreciate somebody getting into pain to this level, But that was part of that thing too. They had incorporated the Magicka card game, and they were also releasing Millennium. If you remember that book.
Oh yeah.
Which has
also called Revelations.
Right. Which one was the one here?
Revelations here and Millennium in Europe.
Okay, and what's the tie around? The little story that ties around that book?
Chiliad. Yeah.
Right. That's another story that people should read, people that want to feel what Clive Barker can do.
Well, now it's in its own book from...
I recently got it.
I
need to read it. It's on my to-do list.
Put it on your to-do list. You got to do it.
Yeah. But, anyway, so that at the Dragon Con convention, I got to meet Doug Bradley there, and he was a real nice guy.
Very good.
He was sitting next to David Prowse and the guy that plays Chewbacca.
Peter Mayhew.
Yeah.
Peter Mayhew.
That was one of the earlier conventions. Now, these guys have to be so wore out going to these things. I would think. Yeah. I would think they would, but this was also the first time one of the first times that Clive Barker, I think, had come, was out with David Armstrong, which was his partner at the time.
Yeah, I saw him. Yeah,
I'm not sure, but that was a shocker when I had come up the escalator and I turned around and they were both in each other's arms coming off the escalator, and Clive goes, "Hello, Don," or something like that, and I had no idea, so I had to it kind of took me back just a little bit there. Both, and of course, David Armstrong's a great guy too, and he was part of one of those. I want to say one of the gay photography books. I can't remember.
Yeah, Rare Flesh.
I recently got that one actually. Yeah, I'm holding it right now.
Are you really?
Yeah, it's Rare Flesh. I got it on Valentine's Day.
I tell you what, I have a fantastic big monster drawn into the front of my Rare Flesh book, and when I show that to people, remember, this is Texas. This is Dr. California. I have to kind of hold the book together.
Yeah.
Well, you're lucky if you got a monster, because a lot of the people I know that had that book, they had a lot of giant penises drawn on it.
Yeah.
You know what? I have one of those and one of the others. But, I had, back in the early days, I could, if I'd bought a piece, I could, and I've never shared any of the art in my books with anybody, because I didn't want it to appear to Clive that I would ever in any way be an opportunist or take advantage of any type of conversation we had or anything. But I would send a little note to him with my book, and he would kind of draw. Sometimes he would draw me sketches of the art that I've had. I have, Harvey from one of the Thief of Always has a Harvey in it, and there's some. Just amazing. He took a lot of time. I'll always thank him for that and appreciate him for that, because I was one of a million people, and when he wrote in my Heaven and Hell book, and you'll see it reproduced in the back of our first book. And again, I had told them, with permission to put this in my book, I'm doing this for me. This is my own thing. I could never, I don't advertise that page is even in the book, but it's what he had written in my art book, my Heaven and Hell book, about, working side by side in the studio and how we could do this and how he loved the colors and all this. Those kind of things are priceless when somebody does that for you.
I agree. It really shows when you get some contact and interaction with the artist that you admire. It's so rewarding. Yeah.
I have a big face in my Visions of Heaven and Hell book.
It seems to me like that's what I see mainly. And as a matter of fact, in mine, that's what I have also. But it's got that letter written in there too. And as a matter of fact, I got permission to get that letter when he was in Chicago with was it Schaefer Art Show? Somebody Schaefer.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's you would recognize it. It's I can't remember. But I had a lot of experience. It was the Packer Schaaf show. That's what it was. That's when I got permission to go ahead and put that in the book. And it's just a surprise. As a matter of fact, 99% of the people that see that page don't have a clue who Clive Barker is. So the people who had been buying my book anyway. But I did have a lot of time spent with Clive during the weekend of the Weird and Wicked show at Lowe's back in the day. And I was surprised. My jaw dropped and hit the ground when I was reading, is it Cold Heart Canyon? Mm-hmm. And I was in that.
Oh, whoa.
She written me into that book. I couldn't believe it. I brought the thing in here. I had goosebumps all over myself. I took it to my brother and I said, read this and tell me if this is really, you think this is what I think it is. And he read it, and of course he was floored too. He said, yeah, I think it is. So we got this invite.
Fantastic.
We got
Ron and Jose were, we believe, were put in the end of Scarlet Gospels.
Where at?
At the end.
Very end.
The people who helped Harry move their stuff out of the apartment.
Yeah, Ron and Jose.
Yeah, or Ryan and Armando.
Yeah, that's my second name.
That goes down in history. That that goes.
That's pretty cool.
It happens. He does that. Yeah.
Well, see, I didn't believe it, so I got an invite to go to there was a celebrity showing of the Abarat art when Disney had bought it. I don't know if you remember that, but they Clive had a contract of some type, or they had an option on it. That's the word I'm thinking of. For a year, and so at the Pacific Center in LA, or I forget exactly what it's called, they had a early show where they invited celebrities and all to go to that, and I was embarrassed. I told Ron, I am not going to Clive and ask him if that is supposed to be me in that book. I'm not going to do. First of all, I didn't want to hear him say no, and then I had to shrivel up into the corner. But I thought
sometimes it's better not to know.
Yeah.
Well, but my brother went. And he said it was, and another kind of weird sideline, Clive, with all his popularity and his out there with everything, he's a shy man.
Yeah.
And there was a letter. One of the reasons why he seems to remember me when I sent him a letter that had a big metaphor in it about leaves on the story tree, which he had used before in one of his stories.
In Everville, yeah.
Okay, there you go. See, and he caught on it immediately, and it touched him so much, that letter, that he wrote me back about it. And it was, I want to say, 5 years later, I was in the studio, and it was almost my brother thing all over again. Clive sent somebody to me to tell me that he couldn't tell me himself because of just the way he is. But it was because of that letter. It was one of the few letters that he had kept over all these years. And it's like this thing, kind of really, really cool.
That is beautiful. That's a
amazing
story. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if you knew it or not, but the Weird and Wicked show in 1998 at Lalou's. Have you ever been to one of the Lalou's shows in L.A.?
No.
I haven't.
Okay, well, that was the first show that he actually displayed his homoerotic photography.
Oh, sure.
And it was very cheap. I mean, the biggest and most expensive piece there was him wrapped around David Armstrong in a loving embrace, and it was quite big, and it was like $350. So you can go down from there to all the 8x10s and all, and see how really for a minimal piece, a minimal amount of money, you could really have a fantastic piece of Clive Barker history. And that was where we had another thing that might be of interest is he, after you've painted thousands of pictures like Clive has, you'll forget, if any of you guys do this, you'll forget what you name things. Yeah. You'll name the same thing 3 different names, by the time it gets through 3 or 4 different shows. And there was a man at this show that was that came in there and he saw a piece on the wall called Revenant. Now, doesn't Revenant sound just like a Clive word?
Sure, yeah.
There's certain words that are Clive words.
Yeah.
Well, he had named this piece that was on the wall. It was one of the 2x2 foot oils, Revenant, and this gentleman had a conniption fit. I mean, he was creating the biggest scene because he had bought a piece called Revenant from Bess Cutler. Bess Cutler things, and you would have thought this guy was going to have to be evicted from that art show, from something like that. So I went to the owners. I said, would you just go up there and put Revenant 1 on it or Revenant 2 you," or something like that, just to shut the man up. And I don't know what happened, but he did leave that show. But he was not a happy camper, just to show you how personal this stuff can be to people.
Wow.
So he was just objecting to the fact that there were two different paintings with the same name.
Right, and the only reason I could see why anybody would object to that was if somebody had planned to sell it in the future, and there was a discrepancy between what image was named this or named that.
Sure.
If you only knew the number of pieces I've called Imagination 1, Imagination 2, Imagination 3, Hearts, 3, all that stuff, you have to do it 1,000. You know, Clive's done well more than 1,000. And you not only do you run out of titles, you run out of you forget what you've named them. You know, and you'll notice in the book there's discrepancy in his arts books over the years. You'll find a handful of things that have different titles on them, and it's just part of the deal. And also at the Weird and Wicked show, I was taken over there. I mean, I was so into this and eat up with it that you would have thought I was the curator. I mean, when I would see people going to these pieces of art and talking about them, I'd go walking up to them like I was a TV moderator or something and getting their feedback and hearing what they said about this, that. And I actually convinced it was, God, the Muppets. Who did the Muppets?
Jim Henson?
Jim Henson. His daughter was there.
Lisa.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. And I don't know if she still has it or not, but I convinced her to buy one of those paintings that was on the wall there. And another one that was there was Brotherhood, which is one of the fantastic early Barker pieces, a big 3-foot piece. And I wanted it, but it was more expensive, and I could buy more pieces for less. And I left it there and ended up buying that piece years later from Stephen Johnson, who was one of the FX men out there.
Yeah,
in Lord of Illusions. Yeah,
he's done a lot of work. Yeah.
See, you guys know all those details. I just know that when I ended up buying that piece back years later, it was from him. It came from him. Isn't that something? So you never know what those things end up.
Was this around the time the Weird and Wicked exhibit where he was also experimenting with painting over pictures, photos?
The first homoerotic images were painted over, but to be honest with you, I cannot remember if those were painted onto the negative or actually were painted onto the actual print itself. I'm wanting to say, I think they were painted on the negative.
Oh.
You know, I don't know if you know it or not, but typically when you take a negative of a piece of art, it's not just a little tiny negative. It can be substantial, because one of mine I had to have photographed here, and the negative was sent to them. And these certain quality negatives, you know, they're expensive to have done. It's a couple $100 to get the negative done for the one piece if you don't have a machine at all.
I've held like glass negatives in my hand, and they can be pretty big and pretty hefty, yeah.
Well, I want to say that this wasn't glass. I've had some glass negatives from Seraphim, but I want to say that these were typical negative material, but it was at least 3 inches by 3 inches in size. So you could see if you had that much to work with, you could work with that and then reproduce it. And I want to say that's what Clive did with those from that first set. Now, the ones that ended up at Burt Green, I don't think those were tampered with. And those, I think that was different. That was a different era of homoerotic photography. I think that was more in-your-face photography, whereas back then, I think it more bordered on, of course, Clive, I'm sure it makes no difference to him, but I think, in my opinion, those bordered more on art photography. You know, again, I don't want to say something that sounds off the cuff.
No, I agree. Go ahead, Rob.
He did a cool where he got the idea for Wick from the comic book The Next Testament. He started painting. It's called Living Canvases, and he used Mark Miller as a living canvas to paint. You know,
he did.
Painting. You're talking about painting on human bodies.
Yeah, painting on human bodies.
Yeah, well, that was part of the show at the first Burt Green. He had a whole. He had like I want to say 4 or 5 people there, all nude, of course, and it was hog heaven. He was just going at it like mad, and they had them all. They're all covered, and a lot of his photography incorporates that into the image of the person being photographed too.
Like he'll have like a backdrop of like a painting, and then a person, that's nude, standing in front of it, and like in the backdrop there's kind of like wings that kind of like match with the guy's back, and looks like he has wings.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like almost like a 3D, almost kind of like effect. Like
that's a good idea. Maybe we should maybe we could throw that little hint toward him, and he could move it. Of course, Clive, there's only been a couple artists that I've run across that to me would literally die for their art. Would literally die for it. They're either going to do it or they're going to fall through the cracks of society. I put Clive there along with someone else that I knew, and it's do or die. And I really think if we were to even insinuate something as hokey as 3D, he would probably have a conniption.
Well, he has published a comic book in 3D a few years ago.
Yeah, I got that, but that's not.
What I mean is by 3D, I meant like not actually 3D like you put on like glasses. I'm just saying the image of the person, the man. It feels like there's a backdrop
and levels. There was different levels of the image.
Yeah. I remember I used to have a blog before I had before Ryan started the podcast with me. But I used to have a blog where I would post my news of Clive Barker. And one of the first times that I recall ever seeing Clive use human canvases was an event that was called Zoom In. And I think it was a Bert Green event, and there were like 4 guys and 1 woman, and he painted them. And I'm trying to remember.
That's what I'm thinking of. That's what I was thinking.
It was called Zoom In.
The painting on the cover of Hellbound Hearts, that anthology, is a painting that was on. It was a painting of Mark Miller.
Oh, okay. There we go.
I'm trying to think that anthology.
It's an anthology compiled by Paul Regan and his wife.
It's all
Paul
story.
Paul King and Maria Regan. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
and it's Hellraiser stories.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just not picturing that cover on me right now. I wanted to mention one other thing to give a little insight into Clive Barker that I think is very potent and a lot of people may not know. And again, I have to always reiterate that I do not speak for Clive Barker, but before you guys came on, there was a CD released called Making Music that what it did, and they did it for like 5 or 6 artists, I believe, but it was to let the fans know what these artists listened to while they were in the studio and all, and while they painted or whatever. And I was at Seraphim once, and I said, Clive, here I am. I know that people need money. It takes money to be an artist. It takes money to live in Beverly Hills. I mean, only a true artist would say this, I said, Clive, how can you make any money from a Making Music CD? And he said, you got to forgive me with my naivety here. And he goes, Don, sometimes you don't do something to make money. And I thought, well, you know what? That pretty much sums up to me Clive's career. All the time he takes for his projects, it's for the love of the project. All the problems that are created with publishers and all this was because of time issues and all this stuff. It's because it's got to be right for him. The pain he deals with people bugging him to get out the next series. When's the next art novel coming out?
Yeah.
All this?
Cabal 2.
There you go. There's so many. I've seen so many projects fall through over the years that he's got to get tired of that. And it's all summed up in that. You don't do everything for the money.
In a way, I wonder if he loses enthusiasm for when people push him like that. If he loses enthusiasm for a project. Well, I mean, not totally, but just feels like
Well, and you look at Abarat, right? I mean, I think a major reason that Disney didn't want to make those into movies is because he wasn't writing the books fast enough for them to make a movie every year, like with Harry Potter.
You gotta spit it out. You got to be timely, and you got to spit it out. That is another reason why Clive doesn't fit into what you have to do to be the billion trillion seller these people are.
Yeah.
Well, the person I would draw parallels to Clive's creative output and style is William Blake, because William Blake not only wrote, he painted and illustrated and made the illustrations for his own books. And once I asked Clive about that, I asked him, was that, I told him that this was a Revelations interview that they said, send us your questions and we will send them to Clive next time we talk to him on the phone. So my question, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember, it was like 10 years ago, but I asked him, so how did Abarat came by? To me, Abarat is very Blake-like because it's a complete vision. You have the author makes not only the literature but the visual aspect of it. And I asked him, is this how Abarat came out of your mind? Like, these creatures of the subconscious, like blooming out into paintings and drawing the story into different directions? And he said, yes, this is a great question. I really love this question. And he said he actually answered himself correctly. There I go.
I remember telling that story before.
Yeah. And Clive, the only
Clive
thing
Barker
you need...
opened up a lot of people to William Blake, because I don't think a lot of people don't know. Clive's big into it because he's English and he's artsy, but a lot of people here I don't think had a clue who William Blake really even was until Clive started spouting his name around. Then we all looked into it. I even sent him with with my Lord of Illusions laser disc that he embellished for me. I sent him a little pocket William Blake, and I said something like, here, I know that you can probably use this. This has great little pieces of poetry and stuff in it. And I tell you, to be honest with you, I'm not that heady. The only thing that I love the William Blake line and all that, and I have a handful of original engravings from William Blake, but the only thing I can wrap my head around with William Blake are the songs of innocence and experience. And those first little kind of children's things. And our children, even my art that I do, it's looked at as children type images, but there's something else there. And I think that kind of works with Blake. It's relatively simple, but there's so much more with what he's saying,
Well, the gyre, the concept of a gyre from Weave World came from Blake.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
From what? Do you know from what?
Oh my gosh, I'm having to reach back into college. I can't remember which. I can't remember which poem.
Maybe the book of Urizen or something like that. Yeah. Maybe the book of Urizen.
There was another thing of interest that, let me see. Oh, one thing that I really had hoped happened when I was at that celebrity art show. I'm sure that Mick Morris? Or Mick Garrison. I'm sure that Mick Garrison was there because he was involved with some of those TV things that were going on with Clive.
Yes. But Masters of Horror.
Yes, sir. But the person that excites me, and not to push Mick further down the food chain here, but to me, I've always hoped that Frank Darabont would do something with Clive Barker, because all my favorite Stephen King movies were all Frank Darabont.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be something?
Which ones did he do?
He did Green Mile and Shawshank
Redemption.
Oh, wow.
Those are the
Mist.
The Mist, exactly.
Yeah, he did The Mist.
Yes. Those three, I love those. But, and Frank Darabont was there. And of course, you have all this special time with him and you can do whatever, which is all great, but you don't feel, I'm surprised I didn't say anything, but you don't feel ballsy enough to say, could you just read some of the early books of blood stories or something and see if there's something be able to work?
Yeah.
Because you know how it is, you can tweak a whole short story into a long, the way that movies work, you could.
Yeah.
But a lot of those images that you'll see on Phil and Sarah's site, with Revelations, from those shows are pictures that I took and sent into them.
Really?
Yeah, those are images that, they need. They didn't have anybody going around. As a matter of fact, the images from the first One Flesh show, do you remember that? That was the first Laluz. Mm-hmm. And that was when he did all acrylics, but they were erotic acrylics. The few images from that show were actually from a friend of mine that went to it. I didn't go to it. And then I furnished as many as I could from the Weird and Wicked show. But the deal is I had never thought they would ever be on a website or anything. So I didn't take the time to go around and do these fantastic, images of every wall, which I love to have done for them. But, it is what it is.
The One Flesh exhibition, that was at the La Luz de Jesus Gallery, I think?
Yes, it was. It was in 97, I believe.
That was all amazing stuff. In fact, it's weird that you can still find that all the paintings that were in that exhibition, you can still see them at the old CliveBarker.com site, which I'm looking at it right now.
Are you really? Okay.
Yeah, it still exists. It's still up. Huh.
If I would have bought an image from that, if I'd have went, and I'm sure it was probably one of the first ones to go, it would have been the one with the man walking behind the other man in the woods, and he's got his arms shoved through the man's body in front. There was another image there. It was like a triptych of all these devils and demons eating at a table. And all kinds of bizarre stuff going on underneath the table, on top of the table, and all this kind of stuff.
I know that. There's an angel that's actually masturbating a demon under the table, I think.
That's exactly right. That particular picture, unless I was told incorrectly, was actually bought by some priest or somebody at a church. Yes. I don't know what kind of church it was, but I was told that it just shocked him to no end. There was something about that, and I don't know what the connection was, but it just goes to show you that you never know where your art's going to end up. And that, if you look at those pictures from that Clive Barker did, they don't end. I mean, they're like layer upon layer. You can't see everything at once. It's almost like it's almost like what you call it? Some of these artists where you just have to go back again and again and again to see everything that's there. But at that show, it was quite an experience. But I did not get to go to that to the One Flesh. And of the two, my favorite would have been the Weird and Wicked anyway. And I had been into the studio before I went in, and we talked for a little while. I said, "Well, Clive, you're probably going to be exhausted." I thought he didn't care much to be out in public, and I don't think he does really. But I said, tomorrow I'm going to see you at the show, and this and that. So I wanted to say hello to you now, because I'm sure you're going to be you're going to be covered with people and all this, and I won't be able to say anything. And he said, "No, we'll have time, and I'm going to have a good time. I'm looking forward to it." So, his love for fans,
what a trooper.
It will always be there, and they don't let him alone.
That sort of artwork that you were talking about, when he does those big long canvases, sometimes a diptych or a triptych. I think the best example for people who have bought this book recently is there's an anthology that came out edited by Stephen Jones that's completely illustrated by Clive Barker, and it's called Horrorology. And the cover of it is just a landscape, a multitude of demons, and they're all standing in front of each other. And it's such a busy, but at the same time, such an amazing cover. I don't know the title of this painting. I think I need to find that and add that to the show notes. But that one painting with the demons and the angels at the table, that reminds me a lot of the cover of Horrorology. That's fascinating.
I hope you do that, because I need to revisit that.
Yeah. We'll add a lot of links to the show notes for this episode. I'm already compiling all of these.
There is so much stuff. I had what was it? You run into the people you never would think at some of these places. It's a smaller world than out there, and what an experience, and to be able to go there and know you're going to see Clive and be with him and be part of the event with him and be part of his growing art career at the time. This is years back. Since then things have changed a little bit. He's certainly more known for his art than he was back then. The first time I ever saw a piece from the Aberrat was excuse me just a minute here.
Sure.
Yeah. The first time I ever saw a piece from the Aberrat was on a sci-fi special, and I thought it was called The Masters of Sci-Fi. You guys may have seen that. It was years ago, and it was Oscar Volkswinkel, and I couldn't tell. Excuse me just a minute. There you go. I couldn't tell really what it was, and I had no idea the importance of this piece of art. So I immediately sent a message to them with a Post-it, and I said, "Save for Don Bertram. Stick this on that picture," And of course, all these seminal Aberrats like Carrion and Oscar Volkswinkel, there's a whole handful of them. My understanding was they had planned on sending these on like a world tour, where the kids could get close and personal, see what an original looked like, see what an original
God, that would have been amazing.
That, and I'm sure that's still in the works, but there are when you go on there and you see pieces that say something to the effect like, in the collection of the artist, in my opinion, it's like they're so special and so important that those will always, I don't think those will ever be sold. And I bet the arsonist would have fallen into that had it still been around wherever it's at anyway. But yeah, I sent him a Post-it, and I had to remind him a couple of times. And of course, they probably were thinking, who is this idiot? And I never followed up again when I saw the importance of that piece. And it was the first piece done by him for the Aberrat. You'll see that in his different conversations and all.
The wizard with his many hats.
That's right. Oscar. Good old Oscar.
Back in the day when nobody even knew that Aberrat was coming. It's quite fascinating. And there are some themes that I have seen that made it into the Aberrat. There were some, I remember Luna 7 was selling some drawings, some prints from Clive Barker. And some of them were...
I have every one of the Luna 7s.
There you go.
When I found out they were doing, I had bought some of those, I had the Freudians, and a couple of their prints that they did, one of them they did was the Freudian, and when I found out that they were doing that print, and back then I didn't realize that, you own the physical product, but Clive Barker still owns the image and can do with it whatever he wants, and you do not have the right to make reproductions from a piece. So when I saw they were putting that up, I had to get in contact with them, but it turned into a fantastic relationship, and I just agreed to purchase any print they ever did for Clive as long as I could get number one.
Wow. So you have number ones.
I have number one of every print that Luna 7 ever did, and in the process of getting that relationship, I also ended up on their website. So if you go on Luna 7, I don't believe the website's still functioning, but it isn't completely removed yet, I don't believe. You'll see probably 20 of my paintings on there from the early days. These are all kudos to Clive Barker. Clive Barker is somebody who people know. Richard Kirk, who was on there, he did one of the Korn covers. Mm-hmm. And these are people with a little thing, and me being thrown in with these people, this will make many a person keep doing what they're doing, along with the thrill of helping children.
Yeah, and we do end up meeting a lot of the same faces in the circles that like Clive Barker and discuss Clive Barker's work. We end up finding the same names coming up over and over again. So it's. Well, let me definitely a community.
Yeah, well, let me tell you another thing that blew me away, and it's just, I still can't believe it, and I don't even know if it's still there. After that Weird and Wicked show, I painted probably a year maybe or 6 months, and I first met David Armstrong, and he had a certain kind of makeup on at the Weird and Wicked show, and so I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go home, and I'm going to knock out this little painting, this little tiny, kind of an image of a very raw and simple image of a character that might have been a David Armstrong, and I'm going to send it to Clive. I'm going to say, here, thank you for all you've done. Here, take this, do with it as you will. I want you to know, the next time I went over there, that painting was hanging in Seraphim.
Wow. Well, that's awesome.
It's actually in the bathroom, and I make jokes all the time. And I say, there's been many a famous person take a dump. And there's a little picture there on the wall.
There you go.
But go figure.
I was going to bring up this idea that we had on the show notes, which is we could talk about some of our favorite paintings of Clive Barker.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to start?
Let me think. Let me tell you, first of all, if I could make a comment on what attracted me to his work right off the bat. And I was no art connoisseur. I was into music. The three items really drew my attention to Clive Barker art. The first one was the bald heads. Now, it's not, let's say hairless heads. They're like fetal heads, you know? Mm-hmm. And I've always been attracted to that. You know, maybe that's why I deal a lot with children. You know, that there's something beautiful about that type of a head. You know, I'm not talking about an old man's bald head. I'm just talking about that cantaloupe-sized head with a little peach fudge. I'm going to be thrown into pervert category in a minute. But something about that. And that showed up in a lot of his art. I mean, he didn't put hair on a lot of things. And maybe that was because he was working so quick. The other thing was a lot of his work doesn't throw a smile in your face. It doesn't throw an emotion on you. It leaves a blank canvas for you to paint it. So you'll notice that the smiles are barely smiles. The frowns are barely frowns. I love it. I love that part of Clive.
They're just posing there in most of the paintings. They're just either looking at the person who's looking at the canvas, or they're busy doing something else, and it's just this beautiful situation that's frozen in time. And you're bringing up some things that I've subconsciously always knew about it, but never really took the time to think about it, why he did it that way.
Well, I'm also bringing this up because it took me forever to figure this out. And I'm also bringing it up because in my art, I'll do the same thing. And I tell Clive, look, you know, you inspire me big time. If I try to copy, I know so little of what I do. Even if I try to copy somebody's work, nobody will recognize it. It's like I'll never have that problem. And believe me, no art is original anyway. I think Clive will agree. A piece of it it's inspired by somebody else and this and that. But yeah, I love that fact that I don't want to call it a no care attitude on a face. It's more of a sullen, like a vulnerable. It's vulnerable. Yeah. And that's another thing I love about art. I've noticed the art that I have all over this house. I live in it. It took me years to realize I'm attracted to this vulnerability of art. And when Clive usually drew or painted his work, it was confrontational in the degree that you're staring at it, okay? It's not looking to the side. We're not talking about an illustrator that's going to tell. Now, Clive could do it because he can do anything really if he wants to do it, he can do it. But I could never, if somebody said, I'll pay you this, if you could just turn this character this way or this character that way, I could never do that. Most of Clive's early work stares directly at you. And this has been brought up before, too. Thing about his work that took me a little off at first, but it started to speak to me. He puts genitals on his monsters, and to bring up it's kind of embarrassing, but it is art. And if you want to do something like that, it's the same as if, and we're not talking about big erections or monstrous things or things that people don't recognize. We're talking about more human characteristics. We're talking about maybe something average, you know, stuck on a big beast or something like that. Something that makes you think that, you know, this thing or this character is vulnerable just like everybody else. You know, yeah. I honed in on that immediately. Now, there's plenty of examples other than that, if you want to go through the thousands of pictures that Clive has done. But that, to me, touched me because nobody had done that, you know, that I knew of anyway. I mean, you can go and see all the nudes you want in Renaissance art and all this kind of stuff. And historically, they try to stay realistic because back then, if you were to create large genitals, it was considered animalistic. You know, it wasn't really kosher at the time, you know. And when I saw Clive, you got this big old beast, and you got this little bud here, and there are this hair or something like that. You know, I said, you know, that's speaking to people on another level altogether. So you put all that stuff together, and to mention the bald head thing, I had an art show once where the newspaper man at the end put, if you go through Don's exhibit and you know why he's doing this, you'll know why most of his paintings don't have any hair and this and stuff. And of course, he was referring to the cancer kids at Texas Children's. Like he was inferring a degree of me being opportunistic, which I didn't like and I never confronted. But the reality was, when I tried to paint hair, it never worked. It looked like a mop because I didn't know what I was doing. And if I could put a sprig here or a curl here, it added all the character I wanted. And that was fine for me. But I never said anything to that article because I thought, well, bad publicity is better than no publicity. And maybe somebody will go look at my art anyway.
Then you can tell that person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those were the three things. It was those balding fetal heads, that confrontational look that I love. That's really my favorite thing. And then this showing up of these genitals on these monsters that he's done, And I really hope that Clive listens to this because I'd love for him to hear this. And
the genitals on monsters, if you look at Nightbreed, I don't know if it's really, but one of the Berserkers, he does that same thing. He puts genitals on the Berserkers, but the Berserkers
did have. Yeah, they were anatomically correct. In the movie, though.
Yeah, they're kind of edited out of the movie.
Yeah, we talked to Image Animation artists, and they told us how they did it. They put like a ball of Roma here and all this there, and they did the big schlong thing, and then Clive wanted it to be there. You have to like freeze frame it in the right moment, but you will see that it is there. Yeah.
Well, go figure, and that just goes to show you there's a bridge being built here. There's a bridge, this connection Clive's making between us and those monsters that I think it's almost subliminal at times. But obviously, in this case, it wasn't. But when I first saw that movie, they just had kind of like tufts of hair hanging there. But there was something definitely there. But when I got my Nightbreed re-edit and all that stuff, I saw what you were talking about on there. I would rather it stay the other way. But I have to. We have to remember when we look at any artist, I don't care who it is, if it's the acquired taste of Van Gogh or Picasso, most of these people you don't like right off, okay? You learn to like them, or you're convinced by somebody that they're good, so then you spend more time learning to like them. But you got to remember, including Clive, myself, or anybody, and please, I don't want to put myself with Clive in that stratus by any means, but you will never like everything somebody does. If you do, chances are you're just a yes man, and there's another reason for you saying that. Maybe you want attention, or maybe you want access to a studio, or maybe you want to turn in a manuscript. I know the number of people that have handed me films and stuff like that. It's embarrassing,
Sure.
I have no control over that. And but including Clive, I don't like everything he does. I appreciate everything he does. I wouldn't buy everything he does, but he's touched me in a way that I'll always love him for it. So what can I say? What can I say?
Yeah, I mean, I've had stuff that Clive has done that I felt was not something that I loved, but at the same time, his worst is better than a lot of people's best out there.
Yeah, that's true.
So. And, we can always talk about, Clive Barker, the Renaissance man. He does everything. Sometimes that's just him, Sometimes I think that works to one's detriment in the entertainment world because, they want something. If you're going to do books and do them all the time. Knock these things out. Don't start a book and then think you have to paint 100 paintings and then come back and try to figure out what the story was. They want a constant chain of work. And that's why I think it's sometimes hard for Clive to make these people happy, and I don't think he would ever make them happy. And at this point, I'm not sure how much he cares to make them happy because from what I've seen, he is, he's his own man, and he's going to do what he wants to do.
Certainly.
Which I just hope that he knows that we all I don't know how and from like I said, from what I saw in the art, he's getting better. The man is getting better, and I hope he knows that we're all pushing him in that direction.
He certainly does. And I remember back in the days of the old Twitter tree, when he used to communicate with his fans directly on Twitter. He was flooded with, tweets of people telling him their stories of how much his art helped them. And so he knows, yeah. One of the things I wanted to bring up is that I think when we were doing like an email conversation a few months back, I don't know if it was you, but I think someone brought up the fact that, do you guys know if Clive Barker ever got into sculpture? And
that was Roger.
Okay, that was Roger Beckett.
I know a little bit. I know a little bit about it.
Oh, okay. Well,
all I can tell you is that I know he definitely thought of it. Okay. And I know that there was might have been a plan to do something, but I cannot tell you the number of things that have been thought of and plans have been laid to do, and that have been dropped. I cannot even count them all. And in all honesty, I'd love to see something three-dimensional from Clive besides someone else's interpretation. Whether it be the demon with its eye poking his eyes out or one of those type of things.
I used to have that on a T-shirt.
Yes, I remember seeing that. I thought that was an ad for one of the shows. Wasn't that for one of the Best Cutler shows?
Yeah, I got it in like 1991 at a comics convention. I think it was a bootleg.
I remember there was a kit, a vinyl kit that you would put together.
Yes,
that was the demon putting out his eyes.
Yeah, that was in I think 96.
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
That other people's interpretation. There was an interesting another sideline before. I know you guys are probably going to wrap this thing up, but another sideline that I wanted to mention about Clive was when they were promoting the Bacchus book. Do you remember that?
Sure.
Early books. Mm-hmm. I was delivering prints to Fat Fangoria that was in 2009, and I worked with the people that were selling the book and the prints. There was a print to the cover of it. There was a print to that mask at the time. Remember that mask that he made, that three-dimensional demon mask?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was for a Fangoria special, I believe.
Yeah.
They ended up using it on the cover of Fangoria. Well,
right.
That had been photographed for a print, and we were doing that. I got to deliver prints to that. I
got to touch that. It was in Mark Miller's office.
Yeah, I saw it too. There too.
Wow.
That's one of the first 3D things, one of the three-dimensional things. But they had a special thing. If you paid $100, which was worth every penny of it, you could have a special hour or hour and a half with Clive in a group talk at that time. And another thing that really touched me was, I never asked for any type of perks or anything. I didn't deserve any perks from Seraphim. All I did was what I would have done anyway and loved, when I was doing those movie promotions and things like that. That was fun. I mean, even if they paid you for it, you wouldn't have any more fun doing it. But when we were waiting in line to get in there, he came in with his little entourage. We were in line outside the room, and he came up to me and my brother and gave us a big hug in that line of people before he went into that theater there to give us the talk. And it wasn't a theater, it was just a classroom. And I just wish, I'm so old school, I just got a cell phone last week. Believe it or not.
Wow.
That's why, Ryan, you had so much trouble getting me to fix this Skype thing up.
No.
But I would treasure that so much if I would have held that up and recorded, because I was right there, in front, had that entire thing recorded of what he was talking about, his art and all. And back then his voice wasn't completely messed up from talking all the time. And, you hate to make him talk when you know it can't feel too good.
Yeah.
That was about an hour of just solid, talking of him. And, Clive can talk, and he's eloquent. He makes you want to listen. It's a fantastic thing. And I've never been, whether it be in a green room or whatever, I have never been somewhere where you just don't want to listen to him. You just want to listen to everything he says, Yeah.
That must have been an awesome master class. I remember when there was a Sitges festival in Spain.
Yeah.
And I was there. It was 2009. Unfortunately, I could not attend. I was in the Valencia area, and I knew that he was going to be. He delivered a master class, and I think you can find the video of this on Vimeo.com. So I'll try to find that and add that to the show notes as well. Cool. But yeah, listening to Clive Barker talk is always a pleasure. Like you go on the Seraphin Inc. YouTube channel, there's so many shows there, like the South Bank show, and all these like interviews with Clive Barker.
Oh yeah, his whole history is out there. But before you leave the Sidgus thing, let me add something to that, if you don't mind. That I wasn't there, okay? But another huge insight into the personality of Clive Barker can be seen. Did you by chance see the videos that were taken? It's a two-parter. It's quite long. Of him where they're having to translate everything to him, and then he's having to talk to the crowd.
Yeah, that's how they do it in Spain, yeah. Unfortunately, for me, because once I attended an interview with Chris Claremont in Spain while I was there in the same year. And I wanted to ask my question in English, but the translator said, please ask it in Spanish and we will translate it. And then they translated it wrong. But anyway, but go ahead.
But what I wanted to say, because I'm not sure a lot of people are aware of this, but even though it's approximately in an hour, the videos you have to watch, and it's drug out and long because it's all this translating back and forth. That is the one where Clive bears his soul about the young man that he was mentoring that had just lost his life. I forget. I don't know if he took his own life or whatever, but that young man had been brought up when I had talked to him before about how important it is to mentor and how good I thought that was that he did. He had told me that he was mentoring somebody, and he really pours his heart out in that particular conversation, and I would love for people to hear that you get a real feel of the Clive Barker in that. And we're not talking art, we're talking humanity and the love of what he did, and the love for this guy that he had taken under his wing. Clive is crying during this, so it is hard to watch it sometimes. But I even sent it to Century Guild, and I said, you're kind of new on board. Let me send you links to these videos, and if you have time, watch this, and this will give you a good feel of who Clive Barker really is. So that just came to me that is something that the viewers, I think, could really get into, because you can't watch everything even though I have, if it comes on YouTube and it's Clive Barker really, I try to watch it. But when you see something like that starts out so slow and this constant, translating, you tend to cut it off, and except the avid enthusiast. And those particular ones need to be watched. You would love them. And those are the ones with you remember, he's sitting in front of the group. It's not the one sitting out on the chair outside in the open. It's the one in the dark. So that would be a great link to put on.
I'll be sure to find it if it's still online. And I think that Clive's humanity also shines through a lot in his poetry. And
yeah, definitely.
There's a book that came out recently. I'm sure you have it. It's called Tonight Again.
Well, I just got it the other day. I haven't read anything in it, and I didn't cough up for the limited edition this time. I will have to, because just looking at the book, I'm very excited to get into that book and read it. Very excited.
I'm sure you'll have a great time. We just reviewed it, and some of us were actually saying that we had more. We thought it was almost better than the Scarlet Gospels in certain ways. This was edited by Ben Mears, who was working at Seraphin, and the book is dedicated to him. Mm-hmm. And it's just this selection of material, of erotic material. And
is anything in there fresh? I mean, is there anything that's been written within the last year or two, or do you know?
I'm not sure, because we were trying to get Ben Mears to be on the show. Unfortunately, for scheduling reasons, we haven't gotten him to talk to us yet. But that's one of the questions on the table for him. It's how fresh is this material? Yeah,
because I know it's been around. When the Scarlet Gospels at one time was going to include it, that's gone through so many different lives that.
Oh my gosh!
It's as a matter of fact, when I saw Clive the first time, Abarat was going to be called the Book of Hours, was going to be the name of that, if I remember correctly.
It was, yes.
Came to him at a different time or something. But this book here, again, I have read pieces of the Scarlet Gospel. I hate to that's a very controversial book, okay?
A little bit, yeah.
So much the story, but its final printing and all that stuff, I hate to get into that. I went through and read about 3/4 of it again for the second time about a month ago or so. Bear with me just a minute. Let me...
No problem.
Yeah. That phone's... I'm dealing with some issues here. So, but anyway, what was I saying? Let's not talk about the Scarlet Gospels. Let's talk about this.
Sure.
What I was curious to see was if they were going to put any of the one flesh images. They have a lot of erotic art they could have reproduced in that, but I was happy to see the majority of the things that I saw in there as the little illustrations and story dividers were things I hadn't seen before, which always excites me.
Mm-hmm. It certainly is a great selection of material, and I'm sure you'll have a great time with this one. It's a very intimate book, I thought, almost as intimate in some ways as Chiliad, the stories that were published by Subterranean Press. So, I mean, this is an amazing book. It's a great... I just feel like the Clive Barker's books have been getting progressively shorter in their runs, and I just think that's a little unfair. Like you said, there's millions of people out there who love Clive Barker, and sometimes this book, I think it was the non-limited edition was limited to 1,000 copies, which I think it's not nearly enough. Nowadays,
not enough at all.
Yeah.
Well, the deal is, of course, if somebody else is going to print the book for you and publish the book for you, because I'm not sure that this is the Seraphim and Clive's group. I'm not sure they're doing this. Then you're kind of bound to what the other people wish, and you can always print more. You can, if you need to. And then I guess they always base these things on what's sold of other books in the past and how many people would want these erotic stories,
Yeah.
That's how I was able to get the Bacchus and First Tales through their Clive Barker's official store because going to like eBay and Amazon, they were selling them ridiculous amounts of money for like $300. $200.
Some of those are
through their site. I got it for like, $30, and I mean, I don't have to have it signed or anything. I just want to read the story.
Yeah, nowadays there's always Kindle as well. Although I wouldn't recommend Kindle. I'm still looking at an old physical book.
I like books.
That's old school. You're talking about an author who wrote a lot of this stuff longhand, and Magicka was 20,000 pages of longhand, right? We don't want Kindle. Don't even bring that up.
Yeah,
I know.
I don't want a Kindle. Can't have the Kindle book. Sorry. Even though that is where things are going, and that's where the new generation, but I'm so old school. I probably couldn't figure out how to turn the page on my computer.
Oh gosh. Don, thank you very much for taking the time to do this. It's been a true pleasure talking to you. You're a real fan.
Well, you guys,
I didn't know you knew. I didn't know you knew Clive personally as much as you did.
Yeah,
I loved listening to your stories.
There's a lot. I've probably, I don't think if he comes to town, he's going to call me. And I definitely would not want to infer that we're that close. Yeah. But we definitely have a major mind meld. And I've probably been over there 4 or 5 times. And I get, there's so, not recently because I don't know the new regime, but the old regime, there was such love for everybody there that I would have free run of the place. As a matter of fact, that Galilee, at the time, they had just painted the cover for the Galilee Limited. And I don't know if you remember that face. It's kind of a skeletal face. Remember that piece? It's huge. That's another 4-foot piece. And I was flipping through them and it was still wet.
Wow.
That's what was going on at one time. It was still wet. So I had a little piece of the white from that was on the border of it. And I said, good grief, I better be more careful in here than I have been. But it goes way back. And I was what I wanted to do was just to be sure that people knew that, first of all, that my art was a definite offshoot from Mr. Barker, and that is and it definitely does not linger in horror. And I don't paint that, I paint different type things, and that he is responsible for that seed, even though, he'll take credit for that, but he won't take credit for what I've done. And that's just the type of man he is. And we want to be sure that he knows, even during some of these tougher times with his health and all, that, we really love him and we want him out here. We want him well, whatever it takes, just take his own time and do his thing, because that's what he has been doing. And we love him for that.
Clive has certainly conquered his space in our culture, and he's a cultural icon. He's being taught in schools for children in Alaska, for example. If you read the companion to the Aberrat books, there's a companion that was published by Revelations. There was a teacher who's been teaching her students about Aberrat, and I'm sure there's more people who are studying Clive Barker right now. So he's definitely made his mark.
Yes.
Thank you very much for spending the time with us to talk a little bit. These conversations are always fascinating.
Well, I love it too.
Good luck with your the charity. I think that's
thank you.
A noble thing to do. I really respect that.
Promote that too,
No problem.
I want to appreciate your support to the podcast, and we will be sure to post links to Celebrate Imagination, your charity work with the Texas Children's Cancer Center. So thank you very much for that, and I hope you have a good time.
I'm going to do it, and best of luck to y'all. Love from Texas, all right?
Thank you.
Love from Arizona.
Take care.
All right.
All right, good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, this is Ryan. I'm back again. You didn't hear me chiming in there towards the end because I had to go pick up my son from preschool. Anyway, before we wrap up here, we did have one voicemail from somebody, so we'll put that one in here now.
Hi, I came here because you posted that I could use the Zune player to listen to your podcast instead of downloading it, but the Zune player doesn't exist. Anyway, keep up the good work. Bye.
Okay, hey, how's it going? If you're listening to this, I don't think we ever said anything about using a Zune player. Sometimes we've referred to the Microsoft store as the Zune Marketplace, or the Xbox Music Store, or the Zune Music Store. I don't use Windows. I don't remember which one that is right now, but I know that our podcast is on that. I've had friends verify that it's there. So whatever they're calling that now has nothing to do with the Zune player. The Zune player was obviously discontinued. That being said, I have a friend that has one. He thinks they're great. But yeah, nobody said get a Zune player. Just, that it's on Microsoft's music store. Okay. And you can download it there if you're averse to, iTunes or one of the other, like Android Marketplace or Blackberry. We're even on Blackberry and Pocketcast and stuff, so you'll hear all that at the ending thing here. All right, bye. The Clive Barker Podcast, or Barkercast, is an independent editorial fan site and podcast that is not affiliated with or under contract by Clive Barker or Seraphim Films. This podcast and site are a labor of love by the fans for the fans. News, features, and show notes for this episode can be found at www.clivebarkercast.com. Go to iTunes and please leave us a review. Reviews really help us get the word out about Clive Barker. You can also find us on Podomatic, Xbox Music Store, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, Doubletwist, Blackberry, and Pocketcast. We have a Facebook page, so come on and like our Facebook page and join the Occupy Midian group for lots of discussion about Nightbreed and other Clive Barker stuff. On Twitter, we're at BarkerCast and at Occupy Midian. Opening theme by Mark Buckle.